some people think these days are upon us right now, and it has to do with government and law enforcement in particular developing probable cause without a search warrant, or before there is a search warrant, i.e. being interested in you and seeking to establish things about you when they had no basis to do so in the beginning. Kind of hard for me to explain, but that's why I've got Gary Kreep here with me. He is co-founder and president of the Justice Political Action Committee, executive director of the United States Justice Foundation, and he went to my alma mater, UCSD, but I was glad to know you're much older than me. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on your show. What years were you there?
76 to 80.
Well, I was there from 68 to 72, so wasn't that far before.
That's quite a long time. There was barely a campus there in the 60s.
That's right. We had, anyway, go ahead.
Well, it was, when I went there, there was only 12,000 students, so I can imagine how small it was when you went there.
I was part of the first, I think I was the second class where they actually had a 4-year class graduating.
That's amazing. It was a good education.
Yes, it was.
Well, tell me about Big Brother. I've kind of got mixed feelings about this subject because I know right now a cop can follow you, I guess, without a warrant. So what's the difference if he physically follows you or uses GPS?
Well, first of all, let me give a little background. There's a case before the United States Supreme Court right now called U.S. versus Antoine Jones. And the case is about a drug dealer that law enforcement followed for 28 days with a GPS tracking device to follow him wherever he went, hoping that they would catch him doing something illegal so they could prosecute him. And in the pleading, and the case resulted in a conviction of Mr. Jones, the matter went up to the appellate court, and the appellate court overturned, and they overturned the ruling, the conviction, on the grounds that the GPS tracking device tracked Mr. Jones not only on public streets, but also on private property, in other words, shopping centers, private driveways, that sort of thing. And so that distinction has been appealed by the United States Department of Justice to the United States Supreme Court. Now, for those who are not attorneys, let me say that the United States Supreme Court doesn't like to take cases in broad issues. They like the issues narrowly defined. So when the Department of Justice appealed the case, they said that it basically comes down to this issue of whether it's tracking somebody on private property or on public streets. I and a group of constitutional law attorneys filed what's called an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, with the United States Supreme Court in the stage before they decided to take it. What happens is that an appeal is filed, there's what's called a conference committee meeting where the justices decide whether they're going to take up a case and hear it. The group that I was working with, on behalf of, among others, the United States Justice Foundation, the legal organization that I head, filed an amicus brief asking the court to take up the case, but not on the grounds that had been raised by the Department of Justice or by the defendant. We asked the United States Supreme Court to take up the case on the basis, at least in part, of whether the mere placing of a tracking device on a private vehicle was in itself an illegal search and seizure. Because, as a practical matter, what the government had to do was go on private property and impact private property. In other words, they went on to the residence of where this person was, onto the private property, and they placed this tracking device on his private property, i.e. his car. And then they followed him for 28 days. Now, in the course of the appeal, the Justice Department argued in their brief requesting that the Supreme Court take the matter, that they have an absolute right to track anybody anywhere they go using a GPS tracking device merely on the suspicion that the person might commit a crime. Now, to me as a constitutional law attorney for over 35 years, that is extremely scary. You have a situation where the government says, hey, we think you might commit a crime sometime in the future, so we're going to track you everywhere you go. And as we point out in our brief, when the Fourth Amendment was originally put into the original Bill of Rights, the idea behind it was to protect, among others, political dissenters, to keep the government from harassing, from following constantly, and basically making life miserable for opponents of the political party or the government currently in power. And that's what we argued in this case. And lo and behold, and I was amazed, to be quite honest, that they did this. When the United States Supreme Court agreed to hear this case, they expanded the question before them to include what we had been arguing, i.e. whether the placing without a warrant of a tracking device on somebody's vehicle in and of itself was a violation of the Fourth Amendment ban against illegal searches and seizures. So that's the status of the case right now. Is that pretty much understandable?
Yes. Now, and I understand the principle, and I basically agree with the basic tenet of the principle as outlined in the with your constitutional frame of reference. But here's the question I have right now: is, let's say some cop has, or an FBI agent or whoever, wants to create trouble for you in some way, shape, or form. They can't physically tail you right now without a warrant.
Yes, they can.
There's a part of me that says what's changed here is the technology.
Well, that's part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that.
All right,
if the federal government believes that some person has already committed a crime and they follow them to try to gain evidence, that's one situation. In this case, they're saying that they have the right to track this person using a GPS tracking device on suspicion that they might commit a crime at some point in time in the future. And with the modern technology, it is, and the use of computers, it is entirely conceivable that every Tea Party member, every pro-life activist, every veteran, every gun owner, every opponent.
In other words, all those would-be terrorists according to the Barack Obama administration.
Yes, everyone listed in the Department of Homeland Security's right-wing extremism report, they are all purported terrorists. And I can tell you an example of an ongoing case right now in which that has been used to persecute someone. But they could follow, because of the technology, virtually all those people everywhere they go, hoping they'll catch them in something. I mean, what if they catch them in a compromising situation, some conservative leader having an affair, or being in a strip club, for instance, or something that might be embarrassing to that conservative leader? Then these people, this government bureaucracy, could, quote-unquote, leak that to the press to try to embarrass someone that's an opponent to the government. I mean, you could have people who contribute to the Koch family. Look what happened to them earlier when Mr. Obama's people leaked confidential information about their tax return to the press. Strictly prohibited. But because it was the feds and because no one would fess up who did it, got away with it. Same thing could happen. So if they have this unfettered right, which they claim without a search warrant, without a judge approving what they're doing, to follow people, to track people everywhere they go with a GPS tracking device, similar things could happen all the time. And we look at the possibility of being in a, quote, enemy of the state or, quote, minority report, unquote, situation where we're tracking people using high-tech things to see what they might do and if they can be caught in a compromising or an illegal situation. And it's really scary to me.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a break. Your website, usjf.net?
Yes, sir.
All right. Again, Gary Kreep, he is the president of the Justice Political Action Committee and executive director of the United States Justice Foundation, on the web at usjf.net. You're listening to the Andy Caldwell Show. We'll be right back.